Hey everybody, what's going on? Your host LovelyCheesePizza here. Welcome back to Let's Play some more Crash Team Racing. It's been bothering me, this whole turbo track thing here. I've been wanting to do that the whole time, and I didn't realize what the stipulations for unlocking that were, and I just have to get through these tournaments first, so that's, now I know. I had to go look that up while I was getting this all set up because it was really pissing me off. I was like, why can't I do this thing yet? I just wanted to know where it was, and so now I know, and I just have to continue doing what I was already doing, and then we'll be fine. So yeah, we'll do these two tournaments, and we'll do the track of turbo-sized proportions, and then after that we can take on the final countdown with nitrous oxide, and then that'll be it. That'll be the whole damn thing. That'll be the very last part of that. So we are on the precipice of something crazy, my friends. Oh yeah, look at that! I haven't really had the opportunity of doing enough of those over the course of this series, so anybody that's been in the comments section just like, why is he not using this? We told him numerous times about doing this, and he's still not doing it. Well, there you go. There's your moment of me finally doing that. So now you can put that one in your ear, inside of your ear hole. And then when you go to the hospital to have it removed, they'll find out there was other things inside of your ear that were equally as bad to have in there. Like the people that, in like those weird medical shows where they're like, oh, there's something weird in my ear, and I don't know what's going on. And they go in there and there's like fucking like long-ass cockroaches and shit in there, or like bees that just like burrowed themselves all the way into their brains and like fired up a futuristic civilization in there where the economy is booming and whatnot. Oh god. Oh god. Okay, here we go. But hey, what do you do? At least it wouldn't be, and you know, at least it wouldn't be something that would more or less drive the person insane, except for the part where it would, because something tells me that anytime anybody would have something stuck inside of their head like that, especially bug-wise, where you could feel it fucking crawling around, that would probably drive me to the point of just like wanting to end it for myself. Which, oh, that reminds me, holy shit, I can't believe I haven't talked about this yet. I read about this like 2 weeks ago. Okay, I was going to talk about this a while ago because I wanted to get your guys' opinion on this. I want to know if anybody else has heard of this before, because this is fucking crazy. Like, you know, okay, you know when you get, like, you know, all the time people will recount, they'll like recount times where, like, with like near-death experiences and stuff, where people are always like, oh, you know, I was, you know, I got in a car accident and I was, you know, on my deathbed and I was at the hospital and I had, you know, I saw heaven, or I saw what hell was like, and you know, everybody always goes into like pretty excruciating detail about it. Well, I read an article about a person who had a near-death experience, but when they had that experience, they didn't go to heaven and they didn't go to hell either. And they went to this place that they described as the Black Farm. That it was just like this completely fucking bizarre experience that was really unlike anything that I've actually read before. And I'm gonna try my best to like recall what it like the whole thing, so you guys can kind of get what this is all about. It's so crazy, it's so weird, but like it's so vividly recounted, and that was like part of what really roped me into reading it. Because normally when I hear stuff about that, I don't really pay much, you know, I don't really pay much attention to it. But though, just the way that this was written, and it was so interesting, and because it was you know, a place that was described as being neither heaven nor hell, and so it like really enticed me to be like, well, where the hell was it then? So apparently what it was is this person was, you know, they were very unhappy with their lives. Like, their wife was, the guy's wife was leaving him because he got fired from his job and she was cheating on him and all this stuff. And so he decides, you know, because all these things are going wrong in my life, I'm gonna kill myself, you know? Not saying that's a choice that's the right one to make, but because it's totally not. But So he goes into his tool shed and he hangs himself. And so when that happens, he ends up waking up in this room. He's like tied up, and he's like hanging from the ceiling, and he goes on to recount like being in there, having no idea what's going on, and then this small child walks into the room. And I'm not going to be able to remember the dialogue, at least not very well. But this small child walks into the room, and he's like sitting here asking like, why am I here? Like, what's going on? What happened? And so this kid's like, telling him something like, you did a very bad thing, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, you did a bad thing. You did a really bad thing. And he's just like in this like solitary confinement style room, and it has like no windows and just has a door on the other side of the room, and he can like all he can hear are just like screams and like clanging metal and just yelling and just all of these like inhumanly otherworldly screams and whatnot. And so the little kid like turns around to walk away, and right as he's doing that, this large man with like a severely disfigured, face and body, just like comes strutting into the room with a shotgun, and without saying a word, just totally blows the kid's head off. Just blew it to smithereens. And so, his head just explodes all over the wall, and there's blood everywhere, and he just, falls lifelessly to the floor. And if I may be recalling this part of it incorrectly, but this part still happened. I just don't remember if it was right here or not. But the thing that killed the little kid like stands over the corpse and just like starts whacking off just right over its corpse. And when it finally when it finishes up and jizzes or whatever, totally does it like right on top of this, child's corpse, but instead of, ejaculate or whatever, it totally spews out just this pile of dead ants. So fucking gross. that as a visual alone is about as mentally scarring as could be. Okay, we need to make this. We need to get this. We need to get it. We need to get it. We need to get it. Gotta give you guys a reprieve for a moment after I've totally destroyed your minds with that. So then the guy, that thing leaves the room as the person that is, just regularly in the room is just mortified beyond, mental repair at this point. And then another guy comes in, just a standard, it's just like a guy wearing like a suit, very clean cut, walks in, and he's at this point, he's just like fucking just losing his mind. He's like, why am I here? What the hell's going on? What the fuck's going on here? And so he tells him exactly what's going on, and this was the part that I found interesting. He's like, you're at the Black Farm. And he's like, well, what the hell is the Black Farm? Like, is this heaven? Is this hell? Like, what is it? He's like, well, obviously this isn't heaven. A pretty cut and dry thing there. He's like, this is not he's like, but it's not hell either. He's like, well, if it's not either one of the two of those, then where am I? He's like, the Black Farm is, he's like, how did I get here? He's like, well, you committed suicide. And he's like, I did? Oh, God. Okay, we made it. He's like, the Black Farm is where people that commit suicide go. And he's like, well, why is that? Because I mean, he's like, the way that he described it was really interesting. He's like, well, people that commit suicide don't necessarily, like, he's like, not everybody that commits suicide is a bad person, so, like, going to hell isn't necessarily the correct punishment, but just because you're a good person, you commit suicide, that doesn't really mean that you deserve heaven either. So, when that happens, neither heaven nor hell knows what to do with you, and so they send you here. And, where we deal with you here. He's like, well, so what am I going to do? Like, I want to go home. I want to go back to my family. How the hell do I get out of here? Obviously in a much less calm demeanor than how I'm describing it. But he's like, how do I get out of here? He's like, you can make one of two choices. He said, either you can stay here and live out the rest of your life here, or, oh god, oh no, oh no, oh, okay. I was just afraid we weren't gonna be able to make it across the gap there. He's like, either you can choose to stay here, or you can go back to your old life, you know, where your family has left you and all of these things, and you'll have to live out your life that way. And so he's like, I'm gonna give you a while. He's like, if you choose to go back to your old life, all you have to do is feed the pig. And he's like, what the hell does that mean? He's like, I'm not gonna tell you. He's like, but that's the choice you have to make. He's like, either you can choose to stay here at the Black Farm, or you can feed the pig. He's like, but I warn you, feeding the pig isn't as easy as it sounds. He's like, but if you choose to stay here, he's like, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that this is a great place to be. He's like, it's not hell, but it's pretty damn close, more or less. He's like, it's a pretty fucked up place to be. He's like, there are just, you know, you'll be surrounded by other people like you that are, you know, extremely dangerous, and I mean, you know, you'll be here for the rest of your life. It's about as close as you can get to eternal damnation without being it. Oh, perfect! I sent him off. I sent him off into a toweringly long, falling grave there. That was crazy. And so he leaves him for a while, and he's like, when I come back, you better have made your decision. And so, so he's like sitting there just like weighing everything out, like not having any idea what to do. And somebody comes in the room somebody comes in the room that was while he's, you know, thinking about it. And while he's thinking this over, he's like asking who this person was. She's like, well, I was just like you. I took my own life because I wasn't happy with what was going on. And I chose to stay here because I was too afraid to feed the pig. And he's like, well, would you have changed your mind if you had the choice? And she said no, if I remember correctly. And so he decides, and I know I'm missing details here. He's like, so he sits there and weighs out his options some more, and he decides that he wants to feed the pig because he wants to go home. And when the guy comes back in, he tells him this. Like, he pleads hardcore. He's like, I want to feed the pig. I don't want to be here. He's like, I don't know how bad it is to be here, but I don't want to find out. He's like, I really don't want to fucking know. And so he's like, I want to feed the pig. He's like, are you sure that you want to do that? And he responds, yes. So he's like, okay, you follow me. So he unties him from all of his, you know, from all his chains and whatnot. And he's like, but I have to blindfold you first. He's like, I can't allow you to see while this is going on. So he blindfolds him, and they leave, and they go out of his cell, and he can hear like all this, you know, clanging metal, and people just getting slaughtered inside of their cells, and you can hear just blood splashing all over the place, and right behind him there's there's some type of being that's like kind of walking directly behind him and stalking him, and you can feel him, you know, rustling up against your body and all this stuff. And so they're like walking down this hallway, and they kind of transition into a different area where it went from, you know, blistering hot to blistering cold and all this stuff, and then it goes into yet another room where you can hear like, I think you can hear like a bunch of like mechanical stuff, you know, going, just doing its thing or whatever, and then all of a sudden the guy said he could smell just like this totally like heavy, acrid stench that's just really disgusting, and so he was just trying to, and like he couldn't understand what was going on, but he knew that like, and he could also like hear the pig snorting, and the thing was just like a fucking leviathan, and so he could just feel like the feeling of terror and just despair and uncertainty and all this stuff just like showering over him at this point. And he walks up and he's like, all right, he's like, this is as far as I can take you. To feed the pig, all you have to do is climb into its mouth. And he's like, and climb back as far as you can. If you can do that, then you can go home. And he's like, there's no turning back at this point. And so he's like, okay. And so he walks up to the thing, and he can just feel like his heart rate just about ready to explode out of his chest. And he walks up to this thing, and he, you know, gets inside of its mouth, and the thing just like starts chomping down on him, and he can just like feel his bones and his flesh just exploding in this thing's mouth, more or less. Like his bones are crunching, and just like his ligaments are tearing, and just blood spilling everywhere. But he's got to, you know, keep going, and he's got to keep on, you know, he's got to keep on moving. Otherwise, he's going to be stuck in eternal damnation, also with completely shattered, you know, limbs and body parts and whatnot. And he's able to just barely, you know, pull himself up far enough that he's able to slide down the monster's throat or whatever. And as he's falling, he's just like totally on the brink of insanity. And he wakes up, you know, inside of his shed. And I guess that like his attempt at suicide had failed. More or less, and so he was granted a second chance at life. And so like that was the whole story, and it was kind of like one of those I vowed to change my ways and to not do the same things that brought me to this point. But it was a really interesting story. Like it obviously I didn't tell it like very well, obviously, because I don't have the article in front of me. But if you want to, all you have to do really is just search on the internet for, you know, for the Black Farm, and you can probably read up the thing in its entirety, because the way that it's written is so good. I love the way it was written, because it paints such a better picture than I could, obviously, because I'm sitting here playing a racing game trying to divide my attention into two things at once. But oh, it was such a cool thing though. And he actually explained how the Black Farm was created too. That was the other thing that was pretty interesting. So obviously he mentioned the thing about how, you know, when people commit suicide, they don't really know what to do with them. Like obviously they're not necessarily fit for heaven. They're not really fit for hell either. So they didn't know what to do with them. So they created the Black Farm as the place to put them. But after a while, because of the amount of people that were going there, like God and Satan they didn't have enough time to deal with it, and so they commissioned the pig as being, you know, the person that would oversee all of that. And so and everything went fine for a while. It was, you know, basically just an extension of the two of those places, and that was just the place where you went. It was fine until you know, a while went by, and they kind of you know, forgot about it, more or less. I don't know if forgot about it's the right word necessarily, but they just kind of let it go. And I guess the pig really corrupted that place and turned it much more of a place that resembles hell than anything else. And, you know, people were obviously just getting slaughtered and mutilated and destroyed in there, and it just became a place of pure chaos and unrest and all these things. But yeah, so that was kind of a cool thing to try to like envision how that whole thing was created. And obviously, you know, there's nothing in like any sort of religious text that talks about that place, so it's kind of cool to hear and read like somebody's account of being in this place that's never really been talked about before, specifically, at least not that I know of, that's neither heaven nor hell. It is just like kind of like a place in limbo almost, that's specifically for people that commit suicide. It's such a weird thing. But really fascinating at the same time. I love reading stories like that. I love hearing accounts about, you know, afterlife related stuff like that, because it seems like for the most part everybody's story is fairly different in its own right. Like obviously there are kind of some similarities. Like when you go to heaven, like everything's, you know, very bright and vivid colors, and when you see God, he's just like this you know, shining being with like these elegant robes and all this stuff. When you go to hell, obviously, it's just like fire and brimstone and just fucking dark and pain and blood and just chaos and all this shit. But it's crazy, man. It is crazy. So yeah, I rambled on about that a lot longer than I had planned on, but hey, you know, stuff like that, it just fascinates the living shit out of me. So if it's something that you ever want to check out, definitely go give it a look. Go give it a look. I think that you'll enjoy it. So with that said, my friends, this is your host, LovelyCheesePizza, saying thank you guys for watching, listening to my incessant rambling about things. But when we come back, we've got one tournament to go. We've got that little gem over there to get. We've got the turbo track, and then we've got the final showdown. So with that said, my friends, This is your host, LovelyCheesePizza, saying thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye.